Well, hello everyone. My name is Lorin Green, and I am the Community Relations Manager for the Seattle Symphony, as well as a Doctorate of Musical Arts and Flute Performance student here at the University of Washington. Today, I am thrilled to have the pleasure of speaking with pianist Michelle Cann, who will be performing a program of Black women composers of the Chicago Renaissance at Meany Performing Arts Center on February 1st. I'm just super excited to have you here with us, Michelle. Hi, welcome.
Hello, good to be here.
The type of program that you have here of the Chicago Renaissance, and specifically thinking about Black women and their part within that. And I just wanted to ask initially, like, where did the concept for that program come from?
Well, it came from really my own experiences. So initially, the first composer that I came to know on this whole program was Florence Price. And this was in 2016. I was introduced to her piano concerto, and that was the beginning of my journey into her story and her music. I was just so inspired by her writing, the unique style of writing that was bringing from the traditions that I grew up with spirituals and gospel and jazz and all sorts of different Black American musical idioms that she would bring in different ways into her writing, but yet it was mixed in this really beautiful manner with classical romantic music, and that style of writing. And just that's a little bit of who I always felt that I was and who I am. So I grew up in the church and I grew up singing these very spirituals, but then going off to practice Rachmaninoff or Beethoven or whatever else, and having all these different musical styles be important to me. And so somehow she puts all of this into one piece or many pieces. And so at any rate, that she was the first, and it was hugely moving for me to know that she existed when I didn't even know she existed for the majority of my musical life. So I knew if there's one, there's always more. I mean, her story of really not being let into the major symphonies around the world and around the United States, other than Chicago Symphony, it made me realize that there had to be more female Black composers that I had been never told about, never exposed to, that existed, that we needed to know about, because it couldn't just be her. And of course I was right. I found these other names, and I searched for music by them, see if there's things I could perform, and put together this program. And it's to bring awareness to these women. Their stories need to be told by as many people as possible. I am not the first, and I won't be the last, but I feel like I have the influence to bring a hopefully great performance of these works to show the power and the beauty of all of these musical pieces that would make others want to do their own research, want to go out and play the pieces they heard me play, want to go teach their students some of these pieces.
You mentioned how Florence Price having, the only, like, Chicago gave her that opportunity, and what that meant for her at the time, and what that meant in general, just for the history of Black classical music, that this was a moment in time where we finally see this happening. I mean, when you were programming this program, how did you really frame it within the lens of the Chicago Black Renaissance?
I think for me, it was really because, again, Florence Price was originally from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Mm.
And we had this migration, this great migration to cities like Harlem and cities like Chicago, because that's where it was known that you, as a Black musician or artist or writer or such, would have a chance to be celebrated, accepted, and to grow without the hindrance of you can't perform here, you can't be here because you're Black, you can't use this bathroom, and all the other things that we knew segregation was doing everywhere, really, but especially in the South. And so, for Price, for instance, she actually tried to go back to the South after college. She went to New England Conservatory in Boston, obtained her degrees and taught at Clark Atlanta University, and came back to Little Rock. I was, married, have children. I think she probably wanted to develop her roots there, but in a way she was forced. Her hands were tied, hers and many others. They're not letting you in to teach. She had a school she taught at. She couldn't teach in the same rooms because the white students were there. It was crazy. So I do like to put myself, I've always been I put my head, I try to, in the best way I can, because none of us really can imagine this, but to try to live that moment in my mind. And I say, well, as a musician myself and as a pianist, it's like, you went through all this, you made it this far, and now you're told, nope, you're not allowed to participate. So no way that was going to stop her. So I put all that as the backdrop to the hope and passion and, just hoping for opportunity that brought all these great artists, Black artists, to Chicago, to this city. Some of these composers on this program, of course, are not contemporaries of Price. They came later, were children when she was just making her big break in her 40s or 30s. And so, and many of the other composers on this program were born in Chicago and spent their whole life mostly in Chicago. So it's not the same story for everybody on this program, but everybody was part of this beautiful renaissance of great discovery and art coming out of Black Americans.
Oh, no, that's beautiful, because when I'm looking at the program that you have laid out here, and I see Betty Jackson Smith, I see Margaret Bonds, Nora Holt, Hazel Scott paired alongside Florence Price. I wonder, like, what that landscape of sound is going to be like whenever the audience is there. What can they expect to hear from all of those composers? Because as we know, while they may all be, yes, Black women, not all Black women have this, like, it's not a monolith, right? The Black community is not a monolith. So you're seeing different aspects peek out in certain pieces of even different, even in their own music, right? It can be so different. So what can we from your set expect to hear within that musical landscape?
As you mentioned, many, many, many different things. I mean, if we go backwards from Hazel Scott, she is actually known as a jazz pianist.
Right.
That was the majority of her career as a jazz pianist. She was an actor and many other things, of course, but she was known very much as a jazz musician. So at the same time, what a lot of people don't know is that she was originally, classically trained. She went to Juilliard and studied with a professor there when she was 8 and gave classical concerts. And but she was just talented, multi-talented. That being said, at one point in her career as a jazz musician, she did this beautiful fusion, and that's what you're going to hear on this program, which is two pieces that she fused well-known classical works with her own jazz improvisation, and it's unique. It's very unexpected, and so fun. Of course, I talked about Price and this style that's this fusion of spirituals and Black folk songs and dances with very romantic music, classical romantic music, moments that remind you of Chopin or Schumann or other greats in the romantics that she was inspired by. So you have that fusion, it's very soulful. Then you have Margaret Bonds, again, in this piece using spirituals. Specifically, each movement of the spiritual suite is from a well-known spiritual, and she arranges them. But again, she was maybe, I don't know, 20 or so years younger, or 20, close to that, younger than Florence Price, but she was actually one of Florence Price's students, Margaret Bonds, and became one of her best friends and advocates throughout Price's entire lifetime after that. And she actually takes these known spirituals and arranges them in a more modernized way than Price does, because again, they're that many years apart in their writing styles. Same thing where Price is actually only in her Fantasy #1, you will actually hear a spiritual. Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass. You will hear this, but #2 and #4, it's just based on the style of a spiritual. There's no actual spiritual in those. And so Then we move on to Irene Britton Smith, who actually knew of Price. Price was just, you know, she was an Irene Britton Smith was in awe of Price. She was so in love with her music and who she was. And there's a story where she sends a letter to Price just to say, you know, that she had attended a talk that Price had given, and she was so inspired by it and sent her a letter. Never expected a response. You know, it's like, you know, to her, it's like us sending a letter to Taylor Swift or something, and you know, you don't expect a letter back, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, that's how Irene felt about Price, and so she gets this response, and she's so amazed. And it essentially, I think in that letter, she had sent some of her music, but Price had just really praised her and what she was doing and encouraged her forward. And this is very interesting because during this time, Irene Britton Smith had actually gone into education just to be a teacher. Her parents didn't think she could make a career in music, and she really wasn't going that direction. She sends that letter to Price. You know, that communication inspires her so much. She ends up going off to study intensely composition for a while. It's, you know, all these connections are happening because in Chicago, these great minds came together to support each other. So at any rate, there's all these really beautiful connections amongst all of these women, these great women. And again, you'll hear how there's parallels in their music, but because they wrote these pieces over a span of the 1900s, we're going as far as 1970s, then we have, and as early as maybe 1910 or something. So we have this long span where obviously music is changing and developing. So that's what you're hearing. You're hearing these parallels, but you're also hearing the progression.
For you being a Black woman, like, how is it to perform other music by Black women? Because for me myself, I have when the first time I found Valerie Coleman's music as a Black flute player, I was like, I didn't know I could feel this way. I want to know, like, for you, it not only like the identity, but the artistic process of performing that music that you do connect to so like specifically and as an individual. Is your process a little bit different for that?
Um, I don't know that my process is necessarily different because, you know, as a musician, you know, I embrace all music that I play and put, you know, the same amount of passion to it because at the end of the day, as a performer, I'm here to tell a story and I'm telling everyone's story. And I don't care if you're from Chopin, you know, a composer that just wrote a piece yesterday to, you know, to a Black female composer like Price with the story she has. Everyone's story should be told with passion and to the best of my ability. So then I guess I would say that that process of the seriousness of putting a program like this or any other program together is the same. But I think it's the effect of it is what's different for me. And so therefore, when I was putting this program together and then researching their experiences, their stories as well, like getting to know each woman on this program, I couldn't help but feel it's like the emotions that then go through you, how it affects you when you're
Yeah.
learning and performing this music. And you sit there and realize that this could have been you and that you could have
Mm,
been very easily born during a time where what you do now couldn't have been so easy. And understanding what it took to create what they created. Because then I think about the effect from when I'm performing this music, I am passing on that legacy.
mm,
I'm passing that forward. That
mhm,
story I'm telling, I'm passing that to somebody else who knows who's listening, who knows who hears this, and then felt like they were alone as a Black pianist or as a Black musician in the field. And I came and played this piece, and now they want to keep going. Now they want to, you know, push
mhm,
forward. It's like we all, these kind of things make a difference, sometimes in ways we don't see. And so it's so
mhm,
important for us to understand that I think it's a privilege and an honor to help tell their story in my own way, to pass it forward in my own way, because I'm not the first and I won't be the last that is doing this. But you never know who you're going to touch. It is not the story that I thought I knew was that Black, especially females, composers didn't even exist in classical music. I didn't see them. I was never shared any music by anybody that was Black, really anybody other than Scott Joplin, even man, in the classical field. When I went through college, nothing was presented to me by a Black composer to play for piano. So I just thought that just wasn't, that's not where our talents lay. And you know how lonely that feeling is, to feel like you're trying to carve a path that nobody did before you. Come to find out, more than I can count, we're doing that. Exactly. So I'm part of that. That's what's behind me. And that's what has to change. So how could I not tell the stories of these women? How could I not share this music? How could I just go on about my life and my day and pretend that I never heard this and I was never moved by all they sacrificed just so that we could be allowed in these spaces? Because they pushed and made sure they were seen during their time in their spaces. And even though people decided to erase their history or at least try to hide it a little bit, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And so all of this, it's my duty to share that.